About to leave, already packing. Come with me, I'm not really asking. We'll get away to a place where we don't know. About to see the world in action, what we can be, life with no distractions. We'll get away, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free with me. Let's be free with me. Not looking back, eyes on the freeway, Bonnie and Clyde, a classic cliche. We're on the run, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free.
Good evening, welcome. It's Jim here at Tutor. Welcome to our latest GCSE Geography live stream. In fact, it's our last live stream of this half term. We're back again in a couple of weeks with sessions all the way up to the Christmas break. A well-deserved half term coming up if you're joining us live. In fact, I can see from the counter lots of students joining us live tonight, so welcome to you. I'm joined today, we've got Jacob in the middle and Vicky on the right to guide us through tropical rainforest, but an emphasis on deforestation in this session. And I'll pass over to Vicky and Jacob in a second, just to say, if you're with us on the live chat, please use the chat to have a go at the activities we're using. We'll also be doing some content recaps, some key topic recaps, and some exam goals. So don't worry about writing everything down. No need to. You can see from the link there, tutor.net/live. You'll be able to go and download everything we do in this session, as well as all previous sessions, and add whatever you need to your notes and your folders. So don't worry, just sit back, have a go at the activities. Vicky, Jacob, who's going to kick us off? What are we going to do to start with?
Yeah, I'll kick us off. So this is our final live stream covering physical geography topics. And like Jim said, we are looking at the impact of deforestation. So this evening, we are going to start off with a ranking activity. You're going to see a number of countries that you've got to put in order of rainforest coverage. So Jim, if we can have the first activity up, please.
Okay. Have fun.
Thank you very much. Excellent. So on the screen, we have countries that you need to put in descending order of rainforest coverage. So the country with the most rainforest coverage to the country with the least rainforest coverage. If you can pop the numbers into the chat window, we're looking at the physical size of rainforest, not the proportion of country covered by rainforest. So we'll give you a few moments just to try and put those into some sort of order. Hopefully one of them is quite easy to kind of get started with. If you are watching on demand, then obviously you can pause it and give yourself a little bit more time. Apparently we need to type the countries because the numbers stay where they were. So it's the first time I've used the ranking activity in one of our sessions. So if you can pop the countries first. So which one do you think is the biggest in terms of rainforest coverage? Which one is the second? So on and so on. Let's have a few guesses into that chat window. So I'll give you a few moments. Have a look at what you think. Okay. So we've got a couple of notes coming through now with most people seem to be in agreement with the first one. Okay, so which other countries do we think are right up there? Okay, so we're going to guess that Nigeria has the least rainforest at the moment. Okay, let's have a look at the answers. So we've got some answers coming through. So we have Brazil in first place. So Brazil actually has 480 million hectares of rainforest, more than any other country in the world. The Democratic Republic of the Congo is next with 130 million hectares of rainforest, Indonesia with 90 million, India with 60 million, Malaysia with 30 million, and Nigeria with 20 million. So Nigeria is an interesting country. It's got lots of sort of desert area, it's got lots of savanna grassland area, it's also got bands of rainforest that lots of people perhaps would be surprised to know existed. Right, Jim, can we have the next slide up, please? Thank you very much. So this evening, we're going to be covering the following things. We're going to look at the scale of deforestation, how this is changing, how in some countries it's going up and some countries it's going down. We're going to think about the causes of deforestation. We're going to think about the economic gains versus those economic losses. We're going to think about the global and local impacts of deforestation. And we are also going to look at the value of tropical rainforests, the goods and services that they provide, before finishing off with a little bit of exam gold right at the end. So, Jim, can we have the first slide up, please? So I'm going to start off the session talking about the scale of deforestation. So we all know that the scale of deforestation is high in lots and lots of those countries with that great big rainforest coverage. But the UN Food and Agricultural Organization actually estimates that about half of the world's rainforest, tropical rainforests, have now been cleared, which is horrifying. And since 2000, the rate of deforestation has increased in South America, Asia and Africa. In South America, it's actually increased mainly in Peru and Bolivia, particularly in Peru. In Asia, it's increased in Indonesia significantly, Malaysia and Thailand. And in Africa, it's increased hugely in Mali, which lots of people perhaps would be surprised to know has rainforest at all, but also in Madagascar. And rates in Peru and Indonesia have actually doubled in that time frame, so in those last 2 decades. However, there are some countries where deforestation has decreased. So over the last 2 decades, surprisingly, you might be surprised to know that Brazil has actually had a decrease, although we will talk about that a bit more in a few moments because it's not all good news. But if we have a look at the last sentence on the screen, despite that decrease, 20% of the Amazon has actually been lost, which equates to about 3 times the size of the UK. So 761,000 kilometres squared of rainforest has been lost in that time, which is obviously a really horrible stat to read out. So, Jim, can we please have the next one? We've got some headline figures here. So across the world, rainforest loss is said to be a hectare per second, so 60 hectares per minute. Every day, an area the size larger than New York City is lost. Okay, that's right across the world in those rainforests. So 86,000 hectares and 31 million hectares per year are lost, an area larger than Poland. So again, really, really, really big figures. Can we have the next slide up, please, Jim? Excellent. So I did mention that Brazil has actually seen a bit of a decrease. So after 2004, there was an 80% reduction in the rate of deforestation. So why is this? Well, there are lots of reasons that Brazil has actually seen a decrease. Firstly, illegal deforestation was a huge issue in the Amazon, which is now being heavily cracked down upon, which is obviously a really good thing. There has also been pressure from consumers not to use products from deforested areas. So there's been a decline in cattle ranching as huge companies like McDonald's try to source their meat from more environmentally sustainable sources. Brazilian government is also committed to reducing its carbon emissions as part of globally agreed targets, and they understand just how important the rainforest's role is in meeting these targets. And finally, Brazil leads the world in conservation. The rainforest itself is home to half the world's species, and over half of the Amazon actually has protected status. However, it's not quite as good as we would hope in Brazil. So Brazil had seen this huge reduction, but in the last few years, rates have crept up again. And actually, when I say crept up, in the last year or so, they have gone up significantly. And it's actually at the highest rate in a decade, despite global concerns about deforestation, that sort of education that we tend to have. So one of the reasons for that is that in 2019, President Bolsonaro came into office, and he has a reputation for putting people before trees, as that quote is quite often used in newspaper articles. And between August 2020 and July 2021, the rainforest lost an area of 10,476 square kilometres, which is actually 7 times bigger than London. And that figure was 57% higher than the previous year. So obviously, good news initially, not so good more recently. Jim, can we have the next slide up, please? Thank you. So we're going to have a think about some of these rates of deforestation with a higher or lower gain. So we're going to start off with Brazil. If we can have the current increase, so like we said, after a period of decrease, they have seen a 57% increase in the last year in terms of deforestation. So we're going to show you another country on the screen now, and you have got to say whether you think it is higher or lower in terms of changes in the annual rate of deforestation. So are they higher than 57% increase, or are they lower? Okay, so what do we think? We've got a couple of answers coming up on the slide here. So it looks like people are opting for lower. So what do we think? Can we have that up on the screen, please, Jim? Oh, it is a 9% increase. So we've got lower, a couple of higher coming in there, but a 9% increase. Well done. Okay, our next country is Indonesia. So has Indonesia had a higher increase than Malaysia, or has it had a lower increase? Okay, we've got a couple of people coming in here with higher. Okay, what do we think? Okay, we seem to have a consensus that we are going for higher. Everybody is agreeing higher. Are you correct? Excellent. Well, I say excellent answers. It is a really, really, really high increase. So 107% increase in the last year in Indonesia, which is a horrifying figure. Okay, our last country is Madagascar. Do we think that Madagascar has had a higher or a lower increase than Indonesia? What do we think? We'll give you just a couple of moments to get some answers into the chat window. So we've got Suzanne coming through with lower. Hopefully it must be lower. Okay, but we've also got Tony coming through with low. We've got Catherine coming through with higher. Let's have a look. Jim, can we have the answer on the screen? It is a 36% increase. So again, far too high, but significantly lower than Indonesia's increase. Right, I am going to hand over to Jacob now, who is going to talk to you about why the rainforest is being chopped down.
Thank you very much, Vicky. So I'm going to talk to you about 5 reasons why deforestation is occurring. Our first reason that we're going to talk about is logging. So logging is the first stage that goes into converting forest into land for other uses. Now you can do this in 2 different ways. You could do clear felling, where you just chop down all the trees in an area that leads to total forest destruction, or you could do selective logging, where you only cut down some trees that are fully grown and then leave other trees unharmed, so that there is still a lot of biodiversity in the area. Now, this reason why this logging happens is so you can use this land for things like farming, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but also it's an economic benefit of using the wood for timber as well. So there's a lot of stuff that is associated with this logging. Can I have the next slide, please, Jim? Another reason for deforestation is mineral extraction. Now, underneath in the soils of the tropical rainforest, there's loads of fantastic minerals and metals that are very valuable. So looking at the slide there, you can see that there's lots of gold in the Amazon rainforest, and about 50,000 hectares of land is used for gold mining. Now, we can also see there's high levels of lithium, and lithium is something that we need a lot more of, especially with people moving towards electric cars. So mining and mineral extraction is going to be a big, big industry growing in a lot of our tropical rainforest areas. Can I have the next slide, please, Jim? Energy development. Now, we all know about the benefits of hydroelectric power, HEP, and hydroelectric power needs a lot of space. It needs a large amount of area where the dams get built, but then also the reservoirs of water behind them as well. And this is going to cause quite a large amount of deforestation, where you're going to get submerged areas underneath the reservoir, and you're going to get lots of those areas exposed to soil erosion and stuff like that as well. Now, it's not just hydroelectric power. If you're looking at wind power and you're looking at solar panel, they also need large amounts of area. And you can link that back to where we talked about the logging on the very first bit of this section, where they have to clear and they have to do some clear logging to make these large areas available. Can we have our next slide, please? Farming. We have got a growing population, especially in a lot of our countries where we see lots of tropical rainforests. They've got rapidly increasing populations, and so therefore there needs to be a lot more agriculture to meet the food demands for those populations. So you have your different types of farming. You have your cattle rearing, which in the Amazon rainforest accounts for about 80% of the destruction, because they need large open spaces to rear their cattle. But also, once they've used an area for so long, it starts to lose a lot of its nutrients, and therefore they need to move to new areas so they can get some more nutrients back in the soil. And then a lot of our cash crops as well, things like palm oil, soybeans, and coffee, they take up large amounts of areas, and so they need to clear fell those areas so that they can plant those crops instead. And then let's move on to our last one. And our last one is road building. Now, this can be linked to wider infrastructure as well. So what you've got here is that when you're trying to access all these resources, things like the minerals or the hydroelectric power, you're going to need infrastructure and roads to get you there. So it's not just about getting cars and people there, it's also about getting the equipment there as well, and moving the goods from the rainforests back into the market. And that's led to a lot of developments of large road systems. So there's now a 4,000-kilometre long Trans-Amazonian highway that has opened up the remote areas of the Amazon rainforest. Areas that previously wouldn't have had any infrastructure there, but now we're seeing infrastructure being created. Okay, so we're going to move on now to our on-balance activity. What you're going to do to start off with is you're going to give me 2 advantages of deforestation, and then have a little think and balance out by giving me 2 disadvantages as well. I'll give you about 20 to 30 seconds to have a go at typing in a couple of the advantages for deforestation. So I'm seeing that Catherine's coming with an economic advantage of making money. Fantastic. Let's see if we can get a few more advantages of deforestation. Got some good answers coming through. Yep, fantastic there, Alice. Space for construction, really fantastic. Yeah, utilising resources to aid development, also fantastic as well. Some really, really fantastic answers coming through then. So let's get our first couple of answers up on the slide. So what we talked about here was the fact that you've got cheap and plentiful hydroelectric power and energy. So you can talk about how it's increasing the energy security of communities around the tropical rainforest. You could also have a think about how it's going to cause a lot of economic benefits. So creating jobs, both directly, things like construction and farming, but also indirectly, looking at sort of the supplies and the support industries. You could talk about, as Catherine mentioned there, increasing resource security in an area. So that could be food security, energy security, water security potentially. and then also helping to meet the demands of a growing population. So there's lots and lots of different advantages to deforestation. Now, what I want you to do in another 30 seconds or so, have a think about 2 disadvantages of deforestation. Let's get some more fantastic answers into the chat box. There's some really good ones for the advantages, so let's think about some of the negatives, some of the disadvantages. So what are some of the disadvantages of deforestation? Yep, fantastic there, Catherine. So talk about the biodiversity loss, amazing. Yep, some more fantastic answers coming through. Yep, loss of habitats again, a very similar theme coming on there. Okay, we'll give it another 10 seconds or so. Yep, fantastic there, Alice, with river flooding, soil erosion, absolutely amazing. Okay then, let's pop our 2 disadvantages that we popped up on the board. So yeah, we have got reducing biodiversity, one of the main ones that we've mentioned there. So there's lots of important plants in the tropical rainforest with lots of medicinal benefits, and we'll talk about them a little bit later on. Mining can lead to quite a lot of pollution. Lots of chemicals are used in the mining industry, and that could get into water sources, and that could lead to shortages for domestic use, personal use, and also farming use. You could talk about how the people who are mostly going to be impacted are going to be indigenous people who live in these tropical rainforest areas. It's not going to be the people living in the cities. It's going to be the people who live in those tropical rainforest areas. You could also link it to environmental things, like it's a loss of the carbon sink. So by chopping down all those trees, those trees are not going to be absorbing as much carbon dioxide, and that could ultimately lead to a feedback loop with changes in climates. So that is everything from me for the time being. So I'm going to pass back over to Vicky.
Thank you very much, Jacob. So we're going to have a look at some of these impacts that we've just discussed on the on-balance activity in a little bit more detail. So I'm going to start off looking at global impacts, and then we're going to look at some local impacts. So on the screen we have climate change is our first one that we're going to have a look at. We've got a picture of some lungs of the earth being sort of set fire to there. So we often hear the term lungs of the planet, as those rainforests absorb those huge amounts of CO2 and they produce oxygen. So the canopy of the rainforest is able to absorb carbon until it is chopped down, and once that happens, that stored carbon dioxide is then released back into the atmosphere, making deforestation one of the main contributors of the greenhouse effect, and therefore obviously climate change. And this is made worse by the fact that fire is often used to clear those areas of rainforest that Jacob has just talked about in terms of those economic uses. So as we are using fire to clear the rainforest, we are obviously emitting more CO2 at the same time. So obviously burning, releasing that carbon into the atmosphere much more rapidly. Okay, Jim, can I have the next one? Thank you. So our second global impact is biodiversity loss, which again was mentioned in the last activity quiz. So we have individual species that are going to become endangered and then possibly extinct over a period of time. We have current estimates that suggest that 137 plants, animals and insect species are lost every single day because of deforestation right across the world, which amounts to about 50,000 a year. Again, another horrifying figure in terms of deforestation. And as these species disappear, so do many cures for life-threatening diseases, which again was mentioned in our last activity. By 2030, parts of the Amazon rainforest could have lost between 30 and 45% of their main species. Again, something that we should all be really, really worried about in terms of just that sort of the idea of that big loss of biodiversity, but the fact that we are losing those really important plants that are, that provide pain-killing medicine for us, that are using cancer treatments, all sorts of things there that we're going to be at a loss without. So, Jim, can we have the next slide up, please? So we're going to have a look at So we've looked at global impacts. We're going to now have a look at some of those local impacts. So the first one, again, is climate change, but on a much different scale. So this includes, and we talk about local impacts, climate change on a really local scale is a really big impact of deforestation. So we've got the water cycle being disrupted by deforestation. The loss of trees means that there's less evapotranspiration, so there's less moisture being returned to the atmosphere, which means that less clouds or fewer clouds are formed, making the local climate a bit drier. And recycling water acts as a cooling system in the rainforest. So without this, the climate actually does get warmer locally. And a drier, warmer climate obviously is going to be bad for local people, particularly in terms of agriculture, growing foods and what have you there. Okay, can we have the next slide up, please, Jim? So our next local impact is soil erosion and fertility. So deforestation leaves the thin topsoil exposed, which is quickly removed by heavy rainfall. And, we know that this is a bit of an issue in the rainforest. Every day it's going to be raining heavily there. Without the topsoil layer, there is little hope of anything else growing, because obviously everything gets kind of blown away. That soil erosion leads to the silting up of river courses, which can then cause all sorts of issues there in terms of pollution, but also can eventually lead to flooding. And even when the soil is protected, the soil quickly loses what little fertility it had when it is covered by trees. So grazing and plantations used in farming removes those nutrients much further. So that decline of soil quality means that farmers abandon the land and they move on to pastures new, leading to even more rainforest clearance. So it's a bit of a downward vicious spiral here. Okay, our next one that is linked to that is river pollution. So we've already mentioned that soil erosion leads to the silting up of the river channels, which can result in flooding. But we've also talked about mining, and we mentioned that mining uses lots of chemicals in the process. So gold mining is an example here, which causes deforestation to clear the land, but it also leads to polluted waterways. In gold mining, you use mercury to separate the gold from the land, which then seeps into the ground. It can then leak into water, and that poisons fish as well as inhabitants of nearby settlements. Obviously, that's not very good news, and it will obviously contaminate those drinking water supplies, which is a massive, massive problem for the people that are living in those areas. So speaking of the people that are living in the area, Jim, can we have the last slide, please? So our final local impact is the decline of indigenous tribes. So although many people in Brazil do benefit from deforestation, many people do not. So those affected most negatively are going to be the indigenous tribes that live in those forests, and they've declined hugely in number, from over 330 to about 240 tribes currently in the rainforest. And tribes people have been forced out by all sorts of things, by the construction of roads, by logging, the creation of ranches, plantations and reservoirs, and the opening of mines, all of those things that Jacob talked you through a few moments ago. And those who have been displaced have often ended up in towns and cities, and few have been able to adjust to a really, really different environment and a completely different way of life. And as a result, lots of people that originally started off as sort of indigenous people living in the forest have developed addiction issues, because they just cannot cope with that huge change in what their life was like in the rainforest compared to what it might be like living in urban areas. There are still around 1 million people living in the Amazon, which is a really, really massive figure. These days, these people are far less easy to persuade to move out of their homes, because they know that they have the legal rights to remain in the forest. But as a result, they do often end up in conflict with developers who know the value of that forest. They know the economic value, and they don't want the indigenous tribes standing in their way as they try to make money. Jim, can we have the activity up? Excellent. So we have a suitcase scanner activity. It's one that we haven't used before at GCSE Geography. So what I would like you to have a look at is what local impact of deforestation is shown in this picture. So the suitcase is going to scan through. It's going to reveal an image to do with deforestation, one of the local impacts that we have talked about in this session. Which one is it? Jim, can you get the scanner underway, please? Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to have a think, or not a couple of minutes, a couple of moments to have a think about what that local impact of deforestation was that was shown in that picture. It is one that we have talked about. What do you think it was? Okay, just going to give you a couple of moments. If you're not sure, have a guess. We've talked about several, so you've got quite a few there that you can pick from. Okay, we have some good answers coming up in that chat window. Well done for those of you that are having a go. And we have a couple of people with the correct answer. Well done. Catherine's there, flooding, soil erosion. Sophie, well done, flooding. Let's have a look. It is actually soil erosion, but again, you could argue possibly it's flooding. It's not flooding this picture. That is actually just a picture of the river itself. So we have soil erosion in that photograph, but it is a good guess. And it was, I was quite sneaky with my photograph choice. I didn't want to make it too easy. Well done. I'm now going to hand back over to Jacob for our last piece of content, talking to you about the value of the tropical rainforest.
Thank you very much. So, the value of the tropical rainforest. We're going to start off by looking at some of the goods that the tropical rainforest produces. Now, a good is a commodity or a product that we can take away from the tropical rainforest. And there's lots of fantastic products there, stuff that we use every single day. Things like rubber, chocolate, avocados, cashew nuts are all products that come from tropical regions and tropical rainforests. And they are extremely, extremely valuable. They have lots of, they sell all around the world, and they're very economically beneficial to any areas that develop the use of those goods. But there's also goods that we don't use every single day. Lots of the plants that we find in the tropical rainforest have a lot of medicinal benefits. So lots of ingredients that are used within drugs and medical treatments and cure lots of diseases. And lots of indigenous tribes have done this for centuries. But now that we're understanding what's in these tropical rainforests a lot more, we're starting to use some of those ingredients as well. There's been over 7,000 drugs that have been created from species found within the tropical rainforest. That's an enormous amount of goods that are being found in the tropical rainforest. And that's why it's very important that we are using them sustainably. And let's have a look at the services now then. And then we have our services. So a service is essentially anything that the tropical rainforest does for us. And now that could be something that we see or something that we don't see. So one of the big things that the tropical rainforest does is water and nutrient recycling, which helps protect against things like soil erosion and flooding and large sort of environmental issues in an area. So it can also alter the sort of climate of the local climate of an area so that it can reduce the effects of droughts and stuff like that as well. Air purification, so this is where it plays a very important role within the carbon cycle in the world. So trees are a carbon sink, they remove CO2 from our atmosphere. And so it is a vital part of climate change. And the tropical rainforests are often described as the lungs of our planet. It provides a valuable habitat for animals. Some of our most biodiverse areas are our tropical rainforests. Lots of different animal life, lots of different plant life there, and that's also very important to us. And employment opportunities, and this is sort of related to that biodiversity. These tropical rainforests are beautiful, unique environments. And if you sustainably through ecotourism and stuff like that, then you can benefit the whole country's economy or the local economy through jobs and also a multiplier effect of hotels open up and then restaurants open up and stuff like that, as long as it's all done sustainably in that area. So we're going to go have a little look at one of our last activities. This is a categorise activity. So you're going to have 60 seconds to sort 8 different things, 8 different sort of products there into the goods or the services. So we're going to start that 60 seconds now. So just having a think, which one of these is a product, is a commodity, good of the tropical rainforest, which ones are what tropical rainforest do. The options you're getting into the chat box. So just pop the numbers in, the goods or services. If you're watching this on Catch Up at Home, go with pause the video now and do a little table. What's man start to come through on the chat now? So which ones are good, which are services. Okay, nearly there. Last 2 seconds. Fantastic. Okay then. So let's have a little look at which ones are our goods and which ones are our services. So our goods was number 6, ingredients for medicine. It's a product. Energy, our hydroelectric power. Native food crops, fruit and nuts. And then water. These are all products that come from a tropical rainforest. And then our other side, our services, our air purification, absorbing CO2, our water and nutrient recycling, our animal habitats, and then employment opportunities. Okay, I'm going to pass back over to Vicky now for the last little exercise.
Thank you, Jacob. That was absolutely brilliant. So our last activity, so our last 2 things we're going to do this evening, we've got the exam practice as usual, and we've got a quick news headlines activity to finish off with. So our exam practice question is a 6-marker. Some activities in areas of tropical rainforests are more damaging than others. To what extent do you agree with this statement? So I'm going to show you on the next screen some tips to have a think about. So it is a balanced question. Okay, when we're thinking about these, to what extent do you agree? You're thinking about kind of the 2 sides of something here with this balance. So you need to think about the different causes of deforestation and the differing scales of those impacts that we've talked about. So do they have a global impact? Do they have a local impact? What are those causes? Can you link any of those reasons together? So, for example, road building would open up access for further exploitation. So actually, if you build those roads, you are more likely to have an increase in logging, an increase in mining, an increase in farming as well, because all of those things are suddenly easier to do if you've got great big roads being built up through those rainforests. And those knock-on effects of exploiting the forest, the local and the global, short-term and long-term impacts, all of those things that you can think about. So when you're sort of approaching a question like this, it's always worth spending a moment just sort of planning out that answer, thinking about those different causes of deforestation, thinking about which ones have a local impact, which ones have a global impact, do any have both? Think about how they're linked together and try and get those into your answer. If we have a look on the next screen, we've got some exam gold here. So the examiner is going to want to see that you understand the different economic activities that are taking place in the rainforest. So they're going to want you to be able to quote different activities. So you're not just talking about logging, you are talking about at least 2 other activities. So talk about farming, talk about mining, talk about the road building. If you're going to talk about farming, what type of farming might you want to refer to? They were also going to want to see that you understand those knock-on effects of the activities. So a little while ago, I talked about mercury being used in the gold mining process, which then seeps into rivers and poisons fish and contaminates those waterways. So you've got to come up with a chain of reasoning there, a knock-on effect. Okay, this means this leads to this, which might then lead to this. That's going to help you show that you can argue your case about which activities are more damaging than others. And finally, they're going to want to see a conclusion that either agrees or disagrees with the statement and is backed up with some evidence. So a short conclusion that gives an overall answer to that question there about the extent that some activities are more damaging than others. Okay, remember, backing up by evidence. And if you can actually use specific examples of a rainforest that you have studied, then even better. Often those top marks are easily accessed if you're putting a bit of specific detail from a case study that you know, and that's going to make the examiner think, that's going to convince the examiner that you know what you're talking about. Okay, we are going to finish off with one new activity. So our news headlines, missing words. So you're going to see some headlines. Each headline has a word missing. You just need to pop the correct answer into the chat window. So our first headline is: the UN Food and Agriculture Organization estimates that about what of the world's tropical rainforest has now been cleared? We talked about this right at the beginning of our session. So how much of the world's rainforest has now been cleared? If you can pop your guess into the chat window, give you a couple of moments there to guess the right answer. Excellent, the correct answer is coming through. Jim, can you show us the correct answer on the screen? About half of the world's tropical rainforest has now been cleared. Well done. Can we have the next one up? So an area, something times the size of the UK, has been lost in the Amazon rainforest. So an area, how many times the size of the UK has been lost in the Amazon rainforest? What do we think? Again, give you a couple of moments to pop your answer into the chat window. If you're watching on catch up, obviously you can give yourself a little bit more time if you need it. Okay, good. We've got some good guesses coming through. A couple of them are correct. It is 3 times the size of the UK. Well done. Okay, the Brazilian government cracks down on what deforestation? So again, we talked about this at the beginning when we were talking about the scale of deforestation. So the Brazilian government cracks down on what deforestation? Okay, give you just a couple of moments here to get your guesses into that chat window before we reveal the answer. Well done, we've got some correct answers coming through. It is illegal deforestation. Obviously, it's really important to crack down on this because if it's illegal deforestation, it's really difficult to keep track of. It's really hard to know just how much of the forest is being affected. Have we got another one on the screen? I was about to say, I thought we were just doing 3, but I just in my head thought maybe there was a 4th coming up. Anyway, well done for those of you that have joined in tonight. There's been lots of good answers coming through the chat window. Hopefully this session has helped you with sort of get a further understanding of some of those issues around deforestation, particularly the sort of the global and the local impacts, but also the value of the rainforest as well, which sometimes is something that students struggle with a little bit. If you need any more help with this topic, there is some brilliant resources on the Tutor4You website. The study book in particular is excellent. That's worth having a look at. And you can either go to the tutor4you.net website address that's on the screen, or you can click on the QR code that's on the screen there. Well done for those of you that joined in, and have a really good half-term break. We will see you in a couple of weeks when we are starting with our human topics.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, well done. Well-deserved half-term break.
Absolutely.
Many thanks to Jacob and to Vicky. Fantastic session. Don't forget, there's so much in there. You can go to the link that will be in the comments box on YouTube to download the slides. Don't worry about writing everything down. Vicky, I've got an admission to make. Jacob, the reason why I got all the answers right in the chat was because I had a copy of that paper 1 study book in front of me and the section on deforestation.
Well, it's obviously very good then.
It's absolutely amazing, but still had to think hard on those questions. So that was really useful. Fantastic session. Right, we are clearing off now. It's half term. It's time to put your feet up, relax, maybe some studying later in the week, and we'll see you at the same time. It's a regular slot here on Thursday at 6:30. So we'll see you after half term with the next of our sessions. Huge thanks to Jacob and Vicky. We'll see you soon. Cheers.
Okay, bye.